Welcome back to Unveiling Islam. I'm David Wood here with Brother Rachid. And Brother Rachid, we've talked about what the Quran says about the book of the people of the book. So it's referring to the Torah and the Gospel. But the Quran refers to the Gospel as, in other words, even as Christians, we can talk about the Gospel like, as a book, but also as like a message. But the Quran talks about the Gospel as a book, and your average Muslim really believes that the Quran says that the Gospel has been corrupted. And why I find this so amazing is you can look up every single reference. There are only 12 of them. You can look up every single reference to the Gospel. Every time the Quran mentions the Gospel, you can look up every passage. I can't find one word even suggesting or hinting that the Gospel has been corrupted. And in fact, I'll give everyone the references right here in case you want to look up every single reference. You've got Surah 3, verse 3, Surah 3, verse 48, Surah 3, verse 65, Surah 5, verse 46, Surah 5, verse 47, Surah 5, verse 66, Surah 5, verse 68, Surah 5, 110, Surah 7, 157, Surah 9, verse 111, Surah 48, verse 29, and Surah 57, verse 27. That is every single time the Quran mentions the Gospel. I challenge everyone out there to find one hint that the Quran is saying our book has been corrupted. But it is what Muslims believe. So what do you think?
We have two problems. The first one, not just two problems in the Quran, in this subject.
There are only two problems in the Quran. Is that what you're saying?
There are two problems with this idea. First of all, when I grew up, I was thinking the Gospel is like the Quran. Jesus is like Muhammad. This is the impression every Muslim has.
That's the impression you'd get from the Quran.
Yes, that Jesus had his moments where he goes like this, and then revelation comes to him. Then he tells one of his disciples, write this verse. And then he had a book at the end. When he died, he left the book. So we project our history to Christianity. We think it went through the same phases, which is not true. So we have a problem understanding what is the gospel. Mm-hmm. The gospel is good news. Even Injil, which the word Arabic, it's from Greek. It's not an Arabic word. Mm-hmm. And the Quran never translated it, never explained it. So we have Injil is another book like the Quran. It should have been written by Jesus. So when we come and read the Gospel of Matthew, the Gospel of Mark, Luke, and John, then we will be like, oh, this is not the Gospel. Because the Quran gave us impression, it's a book that belongs to Jesus and God gave it to him. The Quran never explained to us it was the good news about Jesus. The life of Jesus was written by his disciples. This is the first confusion that Muslims do not understand. And that's why they accuse the gospel of being corrupt.
And there's a problem here, even with the word Injil. You pointed out this is ultimately derived from the Greek, euangelion.
Yeah. Yes.
And so this is a transliteration. That's where you take a word in one language and put it into another language. But it's strange because Muslims always say, why is the Bible written in Greek if Jesus was a Jew?
Aramaic.
Jesus was, people spoke Greek back then. That was the language of the time. But notice the problem. They're complaining that Jesus speaks Greek and that the Gospels are written in Greek.
And they're quoting the name in
they're
Greek.
Getting a euangelion, which is a Greek word. Why does it have a Greek title for that book?
All the names of the prophets are written from Greek in the Quran. Mm-hmm. Jonas is from Greek. Mm-hmm. And then we take others the same thing. So going back to the other problem is the Quran never, as you said, mentioned that the gospel has been changed, but Muslims believe that the gospel has been changed. So this is the other problem.
Yeah.
And they have to deal with it. Show us where the Quran says that the gospel was changed. They have nothing except if they say that Jesus said, Ahmad will come after me in the gospel, and you guys don't have it. Therefore, the gospel has been changed.
Yeah, notice how strange that is. If I come along and I say, hey, I'm a prophet, and I'm going to tell you that the Quran talks about me, the Quran mentions me, David Wood, and mentions Brother Rachid by name. It talks about us a bunch and says we're prophets who are to come and so on. And Muslims say, what in the world are you talking about? We're looking through here, we don't find it. And you say, that's because your book's been corrupted. That doesn't make any sense, right? If I'm saying something is there and you go there and it's not there, that's a problem for me making the claim. If I say, hey, you want to know I'm a prophet, run outside, go down by the river, there's going to be a big sign there saying David Wood's a prophet. And you go down there and there's no sign there saying David Wood's a prophet. Or even worse, if you go down there and it says, do not believe in David Wood, he's a false prophet, makes no sense to say, the sign's been corrupted. I told you what the sign's going to say, and it doesn't say that.
But even if we take that, it's going to contradict other verses from the Quran. For example, 568, Surah Al-Ma'idah, say, O people of the scripture, you are standing on nothing until you uphold the law of the Torah, the gospel, and what has been revealed to you from your Lord. So Muhammad is addressing the Jews and Christians in his time, in his place, and saying, you are standing on nothing until you apply what's in the Torah and the gospel, what has been revealed to you. How can you challenge Christians and Jews to apply, to live something that they don't have, something that was corrupted? It's absurd.
It is, and it makes, I mean, think, if the Quran were saying what Muslims today say, hey, your book's been corrupted, therefore you need the Quran, then the Quran should be saying to Jews and Christians, hey guys, your books have been corrupted, therefore do not judge by your books, do not stand upon your books, you are correct to not be following your books, you should be following the Quran, the only uncorrupt book. Not what it says. It says over and over again that the Quran is affirming these earlier scriptures and ordering Jews and Christians, you guys need to follow your scriptures, and specifically sends the Christians back to the gospel. Christians, follow the gospel, judge by the gospel. Allah gave the gospel to you. That's what you're supposed to judge by. And then Muslims say the exact opposite of what their God says.
The weirdest thing I heard from Didat or from his followers after that, show us the gospel of Jesus, not the gospel of Matthew, not the gospel of Mark, Luke, or John. And the answer to that is so simple and clear. That's the gospel of Jesus written by his disciples. And they don't get it. That's the gospel of Jesus because the subject is Jesus.
Yeah.
The message is Jesus. Who wrote it? It's not my problem because the Quran didn't explain that. The Quran is ignorant about the book of the Christians. Show us in history, even one of the heresies in Christianity that had a book and believed it was revealed upon Jesus himself. It didn't exist through the history of the church.
And this is, they never, especially like the Ahmed Deedat Zakir Naik fans, they never get how big a problem this is. Because if you say, well, there is no gospel of Jesus, they'll say, it must have been lost early on. That makes no sense because the Quran says Christians still have it. The Quran repeatedly tells Christians they're supposed to judge by that. If it was lost in the 1st century, how are Christians in the time of Muhammad in the 7th century going to judge by this? Why is the Quran telling them that they have no ground to stand upon unless they stand upon the gospel if it was lost?
And how much did this gospel stay? If Jesus died 33, let's say, and the first gospel we have today is Mark, is 56. So it's only 23 years. So this gospel that God revealed to guide humanity lasted only 23 years. What a waste. You did all this for 23 years?
And it's, again, it completely contradicts the Quran.
Yeah.
Because the impression you get from the Quran, because the Quran says it, Christians still have the gospel. They're still supposed to judge by the gospel. They have no ground to stand upon unless they stand upon the gospel. This means that they still had the gospel in the 7th century.
Yep.
Well, wait, what's that mean? So it means it was there in the 1st century, it was there in the 2nd century, 3rd century, 4th century, 5th century, 6th century, all the way to the 7th century, and had spread all the way down to Arabia.
Yes.
And so if you say, oh, this is talking about a book by Jesus, wait, it existed for centuries and spread across the world.
Yeah.
Where find us a reference to this lost gospel of Jesus?
It's only in their
sense.
imagination.
Yeah, only
Doesn't
only
exist in history. Nobody talked about it. Only the Muslims are talking about it.
And so it's just an amazing situation where Muslims think we have the problem. Their book affirms our book.
Yeah.
But it doesn't understand it. It thinks that the gospel is a book that was
Gabriel
gave to Jesus.
Yeah.
And we say there's nothing like that. And they say, ha, you have a problem, not realizing.
You lost it.
Yeah, not realizing. Yeah, you guys lost it. You lost the book that we said. And they don't realize, guys, we can't even take that seriously. We can't take the Quran seriously because the Quran doesn't say that. The Quran says that the book that Christians still have in the 7th century, and we have copies from before that time and after that time. We know what the gospel says in the time of Muhammad. The Quran says we still have it, so it's not some lost book. Your prophet just had no clue what he was talking about.
Exactly, yeah. And you know what, Dave? When I heard this the first time, started understanding what exactly the gospel is, I just laughed at myself. How dumb that I believed there was a book that was revealed by the angel Gabriel on Jesus, and he was holding it and going around and teaching people from that book. You don't read it anywhere in the history of the church. It just looks like a joke. Mm-hmm. As you said, you cannot take it seriously. Mm-hmm. When you look at it, Jesus was preaching, he was the living gospel. He was not taking a book. He was not reading verses from a book. He was preaching to people, and his disciples wrote that down. If Muslims do not get this idea, I think we cannot start talking to them anywhere.
And they're not going to get it until Christians make them get it. And so I would just encourage all the Christians out there, learn what the Quran says about the gospel. And then in discussions with your Muslim friends, say, here's what your Quran says, affirming the inspiration, preservation, and authority of the gospel. Why don't we sit down and read the gospel?